I'm starting out today with a non-traditional introduction because Stacey read a book that she
I read The Art of Gathering. It's The Art of Gathering. You need to read it, and that's...
Okay, fine.
You already blew it, but go ahead.
Okay, fine. So I'm starting out with the non-traditional. The timing of the 7 deadly sins, our theme for this season, is no accident. As outlined in the 4th century Common Era Roman Catholic theology, a sin was a transgression against divine law. And people back then believed certain behaviors would destroy one's relationship between themselves and God. And the behaviors were grouped into a set of vices. We love vices. At LiterARTure, we love vices. Okay, these behaviors were grouped into these vices, hence the term 7 deadly sins, including our topic today, greed. Next month, exactly 4 weeks from today. 4 weeks from today.
Yeah, I know.
Lust. I can't wait to do lust. Lust and art. What better topic is that? Wrath, envy, gluttony, sloth, and pride. And our third sin conversation is going to be on vanity. The ethical struggle between virtue and vice became open season for artists and writers, and so it continues to today.
And so today's topic, greed, will probably cause you to run home, jump in a shower or tub, and scrub yourself voraciously with lye. But in all seriousness, we recognize that some of us have been connected or are victims to medical advertising that is deceptive, or have someone we know who has succumbed to an addiction or have become addicted to prescription painkillers. All of this can sound pretty darn dark. So let's begin by recognizing and appreciating all the love and the light radiating in this room.
So now it's my pleasure to say good afternoon to everyone and welcome to LiterARTure's approximately 5th or 6th season, who can say, we don't know, of conversations between my articulate partner, Stacey Goldring, and myself, Cindy Edelman. We're happy to see so many familiar faces and greatly appreciate all your support of our work. Because as you may know, about 7 years ago, Stacey formed a nonprofit called Searching for Identity, and LiterARTure, for which this program is entitled, comes under the umbrella of programs of LiterARTure, of Searching for Identity, and that includes a writing workshop, several writing workshops for second-generation children of Holocaust survivors, multiple book clubs, called chapter end notes. Whenever I ask her, how many book clubs do you facilitate? It's like, I don't know. And last time I counted, it was about 6. And her documentary film productions, and of course, LiterARTure. What's remarkable about Stacey is that her latest film, Traces, how many people in the room have seen Traces? Good. Is being screened this week all over the country at the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles, the Florida Holocaust Museum in St. Pete, the East Side the East Side Jewish Commons in Portland, Oregon, and in Gainesville at University of Florida and Oak Hammock.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And Stacey and several second gen are flying to LA, and they're going to be doing a talk back after the film is screened. So I just can't overstate how timely Stacey's work is, and it's just it warms the cockles of my heart to be able to say that. So in case we get too snarky later, I just want to say something nice.
Should you be subpoenaed, everyone here? Right. Thank you, dear Cindy, for your kind introduction. These amazing screening opportunities are made possible in part by you and your presence here today as a LiterARTure subscriber. And Cindy and I truly thank you. And we also thank our volunteers and the partnership we have with the Community Foundation, making the space available to us this afternoon. Cindy and I are also thankful to our thoughtful friends and generous supporters, Julia and John Taylor, who have nothing sinful in their backup at all that I know of yet. They have graciously underwritten this season, which has allowed us to share literature content online and expand to new audiences, as you can see by the questionnaire that you received in your packet. And we hope John and Julia will inspire you to follow their lead and underwrite Literature's upcoming 2025 season because, yes, we've already begun planning. As you can see, we are type A. So if there's two of us, we're double A's. And I thought of that this morning.
And yes, Dan, I didn't tell you that so far, but anyway. Shockingly,
opportunities to freely discuss and learn about art and literature and have an equal exchange of ideas is under threat in our nation. And that is why your underwriting support and your presence here today takes on deeper meaning and appreciation. And all proceeds, of course, go back to Searching for Identity's work, for which we are most grateful.
Further gratitude is expressed to an artist and a writer, Nan Goldin, the artist, and Patrick Radden Keefe, the writer who exposed the nefarious Sackler family and their evil drug, Oxycontin. We have art and literature to thank for changing the world and revealing the truths that affect all of us. Now, on a practical note, please know that notice that we've extended the time of LiterARTure this season because, as some of you may remember, Stacey and I never can finish on time. I don't know. We didn't know an hour if it hit us in the head. So we recognize that for some of you, you're on your lunch break, your lunch hour. So if you must scoot out, we completely understand. But that I was going to say that doesn't apply to you, Dan, but that's the second time I picked on you already, and that I promise that's it. I'm kidding, really. The other note is if you have any electronic devices, please put them on silent.
Thank you. Every good story has a fallen hero. And as readers, we read to discover how our hero will recover. And we want buy-in. We want to get behind the hero's journey. Alas, in the case of the Sackler family saga, portrayed in Empire of Pain, I found no hero. Try as I might, there is no Sackler that fit this category. Our author, Patrick Radden Keefe, does an excellent job of walking us through the Promethean rise of the Sackler family and then their descent into greed, leading to the death of approximately 500,000 people to date. Empire of Pain is a book you can't unread. An excerpt of the book first appeared in the October 30th, 2017 edition of The New Yorker. 2 years later, the book was published. Now, I opened Empire completely prepared to be impartial, but it is impossible not to feel the pain and loss suffered by the deadly consequences of Oxycontin, also known as hillbilly heroin, Oxy, OC, Roxy, cotton kickers, beans, rims, tires, buttons. I could go on and on. Yet, Richard Sackler, the disgraced head of Purdue, had one message for anyone who was addicted or overdosed: good riddance. Good grief. Greed certainly trumps compassion. Look, the Sacklers did not have to become a clan of pariahs. To quote David Bowie, we could have been heroes. But the deadly sin of greed is sparkly and powerful. Go ahead. We could have had an inspiring story of the American self-made man, but instead we read about a hero who never recovered. Empire offers endless plot lines to follow, to snort, to sniff, to crush, to chew. But today, I've chosen to follow the thread of Arthur Sackler, the big brother, doctor and madman, to illustrate how his advertising genius led to the deadly Oxycontin and now fentanyl epidemic from the 90s until today. Go ahead. I will leave the more dramatic story to Netflix and Hulu. And I was just binging on Better Call Saul just a few nights ago. So good. And I realized that this scene where Nacho is getting these drugs from this very nerdy guy who works for a prescription pharmaceutical company, they were exchanging 80s. And that's another nickname for Oxycontin at 80 milligrams, which would kill us all in an instant. I digressed. I'm sorry. I just got excited. Okay, so I'm going to, like I said, all the drama I'm going to lead. Go ahead to the next one. However, I wanted you, there's some other ones that have been on Netflix as well. However, I want you to have a visual of the folks mentioned in the book. So I'm going to editorialize for one moment the Ariviste opulence and grandeur of this family's lifestyle would make Charles and Camilla cringe. Gordon Gekko would love this cast of cretins. I'm certain that somewhere I missed in these pages, I'm sure Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein showed up. I mean, these are the lowest of the low, okay? And that's all the gossip I'm going to do on that. Now... Stay for the post literature. Sadly, I could not locate a photo of Abraham Arthur, a.k.a. Artie Sackler's parents, Isaac and Sophie. So we are just left to conjure the proud mom and dad and their 3 boys, Arthur, Mortimer, and Ray. This was a prosperous family. They were living the American dream. And if only it stopped there. Am I ready for the next? Not yet. Okay. The Sacklers made sure that their boys, all 3 that you see in the top row, knew the bedrock for success in America was education. And all 3 boys became MDs. But the stock market crash of 1929 wiped out the family's finances. So I'm sure Father Isaac, with a heavy heart, had to tell his boys, there is no money to go to college. This news does not detour our go-getter Artie. Arthur works several jobs through high school and then puts himself through undergrad. Go ahead and change. And you can see the staged photo right here. So says our author of Artie looking very studious, studying, and like all of a sudden looking up at the camera. But evidently he was doing selfies way before it was a thing. Okay. So Patrick Radden Keefe says that, quote, by the time Arthur graduated from college in 1933, he made enough money. It's a depression, right? He made enough money to purchase a store for his parents. They had lost a grocery store during the crash. He buys another store while going to school and doing odd jobs. Just imagine. But this young man does this. Anything is possible in America. And at this point of the story, I admire this guy 100%. And naturally, it is understandable then that Arthur would think, well, what if medicine isn't enough? I need a little something more. So while he is in medical school, Arthur becomes a copywriter for a pharmaceutical company called Shearing. And there we first learn Arthur could sell drugs. Following in their older brother's footsteps, Mortimer and Raymond join him at Creedmoor Psychiatric Hospital in Queens for their residencies. Go ahead to the next one. Always led quietly by Arthur, the brothers change the entire practice of psychiatry, medical advertising, and big pharma that we know and are bombarded with every single day of our lives. The brothers Back then, they were not fans of the current day's mental illness treatments of lobotomies, electric shock therapy, institutionalization, and sterilization. To quote Arthur, quote, "What did it say about American society? We have put the mentally ill behind hospital walls, consigning them to a kind of death," unquote. The Sackler doctors believed that mental illness was related to brain chemistry gone awry. An Empire of Pain gives great detail that is easily readable and explains the Sacklers' researched and prescribed treatments. These resulted in good outcomes. People were able to go home. This work led them, now put a pin in this, this work led them to establish their own research facility, okay? And here is where our story enters a new chapter where we see what I call the beta version of Big Pharma, okay? Let's call it the deceptive, deceiving decades. Go ahead. The brothers' aim was to trace the, quote, chemical causes of insanity, unquote. And they felt the answer to every mental problem could be found in a pill. And furthermore, we can make a pill and make up a problem for it. Arthur knew how to communicate this information with the general public because all this time, he also gets a job at an ad agency called McAdams. And of course, he goes on to buy the agency a few years later. So this man knows pharmaceuticals, advertising, and sales. You can see his PR here. In A Better Homes and Garden, there is a Better Homes and Garden archive on the interweb, and I saw it, and there are some crazy recipes, but for another time. Okay. Okay. A lot of Jell-O. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so here it says in this article, quote, "The chemical activity theory of the Sacklers is as revolutionary and almost as complicated as Einstein's theory." So, expert Arthur was selling drugs, and he earned a reputation in the ad industry as the impresario of the pharmaceutical sales universe. Arthur also began to create advertising pieces that paraded as legitimate medical journals with peer review and published articles, all research done by one peer, the Sacklers, who praised the research and the results. Remember, with a research facility, you have all the possibilities. He was marketing the research as true empirical results, peer-reviewed. And then he prints these results in these made-up journals, in addition to having them published in respected journals like JAMA. The publications that he created, these slick ad pieces, like when you get the Costco thing in the mail, right? One side's the ads, the other side looks like an article. That's all Sackler, okay? These publications never, ever contain his name, never contain the name of the facility. It's all smoke and mirrors. Arthur takes none of the blame for anything and none of the credit either. He is always 3 steps removed. He's like the opposite of Kevin Bacon.
He's just stealth.
Yeah.
He's completely stealth.
From the get-go. This is not ethical. This is deceptive at best. And P.S., let's begin to trace a line, okay? We can now trace a line because this is exactly what Purdue does. Some 3, 4, I don't know, it's math, decades later, when Purdue is run by his brothers Mortimer and Raymond, and then his nephew Richard. They manipulate their research, and then they bury it if it's bad news, or they twist and shout it so it looks like good news. This is only one example. page after page in this book of Arthur's pioneering advertising prowess, eventually embraced by Purdue. While the brothers are at Creedmoor, their father dies, but before his passing, he says to them, "I have given you the most important thing a father can give, and that is a good name. You can always lose a fortune, you can always make another. But what is most important is your name. Lose that, and you can never get it back." If only. Arthur perhaps understood his deception from the start, but we'll never know. We'll never know because he died in 87 and he is not here to defend himself. But what is clear was Arthur was all about the smoke and the mirrors. Yeah, go ahead. The smoke and the mirrors. And when it came to his name and to his connections and his business dealings, you could not draw a line. He made sure. Here's another example of his style. While working full-time at Creedmoor and his agency, he faced keen competition from another competitive pharmaceutical ad agency. So he doesn't tell his brothers, but he goes and makes a deal with that competing ad agency, right? He ends up owning that part ownership in that agency. So he's cornering the market. I mean, I guess Dan would know if that's what it's called. But, I mean, this is all business. But anyway, it doesn't matter what drugs, who buys what, because he's making money from the competitor or from his own clients at McAdams. I could never be that complicated. It's too complicated. It's just too complicated. Okay, but anyway. So this is who we're dealing with. Another few examples of drug-selling strategies that Arthur invents for companies that you recognize, like Pfizer and Roche. With each stroke of his advertising ingenuity, you will now be able to draw a direct line from Arthur's ingenuity and the opioid epidemic. I didn't mean to point at you. Okay. So this little slide I'm calling Dear Doctor. This is simply a little postcard, front and back, promoting tetracycline, sending little messages to doctors, giving them, oh, guess what? We have a new drug for you, brand new. Was not done before Arthur. Go ahead, the next one.
Not to mention the 3 wives. Are you going to talk about that?
Excuse me, that's like yes, you just took away the thunder.
I'm sorry.
The thunder is gone.
So sorry.
You're excited.
Not.
You're excited. It's lust. It's lust.
It's
okay.
lust.
Okay, so now here's another example. Arthur encourages schemes, what he calls to incentivize doctors. So and he had all these algorithms. Which doctor was most incentivized by cash? Which one liked to do the golf? Which one preferred to go to dinner? Which one preferred lunch? I mean, he's like Mark Zuckerberg with like the analytics. But he does this in order to push his meds out to specific doctors and increase sales. So this is, it's amazing. Fast forward, I mean, they don't do it so much anymore, but at Purdue, because there's laws, but at Purdue back in the day, they would have these elaborate conventions and even fancy words like symposiums where they would invite doctors to come and be educated. It was a total, it was sales. It was sales. From front to back sales. I don't care how important you make the type look and what you're handing out. Sales. I'm like schwitzing. I'm getting hot. It's overwhelming. Okay. So here are some. Vanna, please, next slide. Okay. So here are some examples of some drugs to cure every condition that existed or was made up. And I am sure you recognize. Oh, look at Janet. Oh, my God. Yeah. So here are ads that may look familiar. Some of you may remember Milltown. And P.S., manufactured to kids, yes, men, but mostly these tranquilizers were for women. Right, they were for women, okay? And notice how the copy, there's like a column on that page, looks like a legitimate ad. It's an ad. Don't be fooled. As a journalist, I will tell you, no journalist wrote that. That's Arthur. That's Arthur and his team. I'm pointing here, but I mean there. Okay. All righty. So, does your child have nightmares? Is he upset because of a new move? Does your child misbehave? Doesn't like his new school? We have a pill for that. And it's like TV dinners. It's modern. Let's do it. Let's give it a try, right? Okay. So go ahead to the next one. Now, what if a product he peddled, like Librium, and that's such a crazy name, because what is Librium? We think of equilibrium, or we think of freedom, liberty. I mean, it's disgusting. Anyway, so what if a product he peddled was found dangerous, like Librium was? What do? Oh my gosh, I should come out, I should make a statement, I should mea culpa, we're so sorry. Oh no, au contraire, mon frère. We will just make another drug to take care and replace that one. So we will just push this one out, and this is where we come up with the next slide with Mother's Little Helper. And Valium was so successful, you may remember the Rolling Stones had a song about it, right? And even if you look at the pill bottle, Elvis Presley was taking it. Poor Elvis, God bless him. So if is your wife hysterical? You can go on to the next one. Is she not thrilled about cleaning the oven or vacuuming? Right? Is your daughter worried about going to college? That was actually a headline. Is your daughter worried about going to college? Does your wife have psychic tension? They like that word. That's everywhere. Psychic tension, right? We have a pill. And then, if it doesn't work, the reason why is because you need more. And that's where the addiction starts. You need more. We'll give you more. And you know what? After a few Valium, happy as a clam, right? And then you crave it, and then we have drugs to fix that too. So anyway, I don't know. Let's go on a little and see what happens. And here's an ad for, these are the back of those postcards I showed you earlier. So these are several postcards I mushed together because they made tetracycline, and then they came up with a word that may remind you of the fertilizer you may still be putting on your yard, broad spectrum for crabgrass, blah, blah, blah. He lifted the word broad spectrum and just put it on the people pills and called it a broad spectrum antibiotic. So put it in your ear, put it in your lady parts, put it in your tongue, wherever you want to put it, it's going to fix what's ever wrong. Just prescribe that, just some tetracycline. Okay, so this deceptive advertising, which is so common today, this is all courtesy of Arthur's amazing marketing mind. He even created a 24/7 doctor radio that had real stories by reporters and ads. All schlock, all advertising. All right. Worse. And fast forward. At Purdue, doctors were paid to read scripts and make commercials that promoted the safety of Oxycontin, of course, based on whose research? I mean, it's sickening, right? The safety, and if you were sick or it wasn't working for you or you complained about being addicted, you weren't addicted, you were pseudo-addicted. You were making it up in your mind. So now they're gaslighting people. I mean, it's just, it's crazy town. All right, so again, with Oxy, go ahead to the next slide. If your pain wasn't going away, and let's remember, people have legitimate pain, and we all know people in this room who need pain meds, and this is not about that. This is about the marketing side, okay? But you need more. In fact, the slide on the yellow ad tells you how you taper up, not taper off, right? But how we taper up. So we're going to make you feel better. So just take more. So yeah, anyway, okay. So who is he going to market these to? The Sacklers at Purdue made the conscious decision to push Oxys hard on what kind of doctors? On the GPs. You know why? They didn't see them as smart enough. They could get away with it with the GPs, but not the specialists, okay? And they would also target zip codes and regions, and if you read Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, you can understand this from a novelist perspective. Empire of Pain. I'm exhausted. I need a painkiller. I'm exhausted talking about Empire of Pain takes us through this advertising metamorphosis with Arthur's rise and the chilling influence his strategies have on each of us in this room. And I'm going to prove it right now. Do you remember when the COVID vaccine first came out to the general public, right? And every conversation, I guarantee you, went like this. Did you get the vaccine? Stephanie, did you get the vaccine? Yes? Do you know which one you got? What, do you know the name of it? Who knows the name of the vaccine they got? Pfizer? Okay, anyone get the, like, Moderna and J&J? Notice none of us said the name of the drug. We all said the name of the pharmaceutical company. Thank you, Arthur Sackler. He felt it was better branding-wise and you could make more money if you sold a brand. Because then, look, I've got Pfizer running around in me right now. If I trust that, well, then I'll get the Pfizer cough syrup or whatever. That is his genius. I have no idea where I am on this sheet of paper at this point. Yes, let's do that. Okay. So the book goes on to explain that the brothers eventually leave Creedmoor and not on good terms. And they buy a small pharmaceutical company that you may remember called Purdue Frederick. Best known for earwax removal and stool softeners. Okay? Now, greed corrupts families, and this applies to the Sacklers, right? An eventual rift severed Arthur from Mortimer and Ray, and Arthur is cut out of Purdue's Frederick's sale when a fourth owner dies. And all that drama is covered with Raymond Chandler finesse on dark street corners and secret handshakes. But it is suffice to know, so I'm just going to kind of like, when you flatten a big file, I'm just going to go ahead and compress here a minute, that the precursor to Oxycontin was MS-Contin, okay, which had bad side effects, so they came up with the Oxy, right? MS-Contin was manufactured by Purdue Frederick. So don't tell me you can't draw a straight line from Arthur to the opioid epidemic, because his heirs would tell you something different, but don't listen to them because you came here today and you heard the truth. And I read this book. Okay, so Arthur never speaks to his brothers again. You can go to the next slide. His heirs are frozen out of profits, and this is not the story you find on the Purdue website when you go there and you learn the history about Purdue. It's sickening, and is sanctimony a word? It's sickening in his sanctimonious flavor. Now, as for Arthur, and his passion for collecting art, Asian art in particular. Go ahead to the next one. I'm going to leave that rabbit hole and his lair at the Met, another story for you to explore if you decide to read the book. Has anyone here read the book? Are you happy you read the book? You are. And why is that?
It was excellent. I mean, it was just a great, from start to finish, and the through line, as you say, is fascinating and has so many repercussions for today and in misinformation and what are our sources, et cetera.
When I closed the book, I just thought, I had no idea. No, I was gobsmacked. Thank you. So it's an amazing art collection, and we could talk about that forever, but I want to talk about his other collection, which is the next slide.
Well, we will talk about some of the Met. The Met comes into my presentation.
We have to do that. But this is his collection of wives. Okay? Patrick Radden Keefe explains that when Arthur had to make a choice of either or, like which one I'm going to pick, his answer was always both. I'll have both. So during some points in his life, there were two Mrs. Sacklers walking around New York City.
He was a bigamist. He practiced bigamy, really.
He was very busy. He was, I mean, he would have, lunch on 57th Street with one set of family, and then by the end of the day, he'd be back on the island having dinner. He's
in the
very
Dutch house.
Yeah, in the Dutch, very organized. What an organized man! I could never pull it off.
He probably never slept. I mean, and he was so secretive.
He had 2 briefcases, and he kept it straight. Now, I can't even get everything into one briefcase and get it here today. Anyway, I'm not even going to say anything, but just trust me that it's a miracle that we stand before you so grateful. Okay, now, I would be remiss if I did not include his supersized philanthropic money laundering, and that's a term used in the book, which leads to a serious existential question of dark money and art. The whole patron and dark money thing. So we may do that another time.
We might get into it at the end of ours. At the end of our.
Leave you any time.
Yeah,
Is that
if you
what
leave
you're
me
saying?
any time.
Okay.
Well, no,
so
you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. So now we have taken a wild ride through the muck and the greed oozing from every page of Empire of Pain. And as a postscript to the book, recently the family settled dozens of lawsuits, but they walk away admitting zero guilt. Zilch, nada. Not one Sackler. They are also immune from any type of civil prosecution. They retain billions. This is due to fancy legal footwork that hog ties any payouts in the settlements they made to the victims' families. So if you take their money, then they can't pay out to the victims' families. It's sickening. Purdue, as we know it, dies. But alas, resurrection of another pharmaceutical company, you can go ahead and change it. I can't even pronounce it. It's named like Noah. Oh, go one more. Noah, yeah. And that pharmaceutical company produces medicines for opioid addiction. Isn't that lovely of them? Overdose reversal medicines and Oxycontin. Okay? So they're still making it. And see, again, the PS is, or the disclaimer is, people do need it. There are people who need it. I'm talking about the sick advertising. I just want to make that clear. So the Sacklers, they're just incredibly thoughtful people. Don't you think? It's just it's such big hearts, Okay. So I imagine looking at this chart that Arthur would love this cycle of profit and greed. It's entropic. It's incredibly successful. So whether or not I have argued this case successfully before you today, that Arthur is responsible for hundreds of thousands dead and addicted, you do have to admit his contribution to advertising pharmaceuticals has been successful beyond belief. Although this disgraced clan have outmaneuvered our justice system, I want you to leave here and take a deep breath and take care. Just deep breath, take care, because we each have one thing that the Sacklers will never have, right? And that is a good name, right? And who is the force that crumbled this empire of pain? Who brought it down? That would be the heroine of literature today, named Nan Goldin. Cindy?
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you.
Well, there are many avenues to enter the world of today's artist, Nan Goldin, a well-known, highly collected photographer, a woman whose more than 50-year career brought significant change to the art world. How many people have ever heard of Nan Goldin? Well, that's nice. Oh, yeah, well, of course. We could spend our entire LiterARTure series on her turbulent life. But we won't. Her unconventional color photographs, her contributions to art history, however, but today is devoted to her unusual work as a social change agent, someone with many reasons not to get tangled up with one of the wealthiest families in America. Her anger and her focus have ripped the Band-Aid off the Sackler family's respectability, its philanthropic reputation, and its repugnant greed. Describing her as extraordinary is an understatement. We're going to focus our lens, no pun intended, on Goldin, the resilient icon who truly deserves the descriptive courageous. And I know brave and courageous are thrown around so much in the world today, but she really is an incredibly courageous woman. Because of her activism in changing the conversation for those like herself who suffered terribly from having used Oxycontin. That's right. You heard me correctly. She was addicted to Oxycontin for 3 years after suffering a pinched nerve after a surgery on her wrist. And she's courageous for demanding accountability for all the pain and suffering caused by the enormous corporate greed of the Sacklers and Purdue Pharma. And Goldin's campaign is a vital one, as statistics involving drug overdoses are grim. According to the CDC, and we know the Sacklers don't have anything to do with the CDC anymore. They used to be able to buy some of their scientists. There have been 1 million deaths from drug overdoses, with over 75% opioid related. Since 1999. Goldin's life experiences have steeled her for the kind of toughness and perseverance that she has employed these past 6 years attacking the evil drug. Now we're looking right now at a portrait of the 70-year-old Goldin, who was recently inducted into the International Photography Hall of Fame, looking like she's not really enjoying having her photo taken, probably because she wasn't the one behind the camera. Notice her fatigue and her annoyance, her right hand cradling her tilted head, and her expression of, come on, hurry up, let's get this over with. You know, I can sympathize with that. I'm like, my picture, now she's taking my picture taken. And the photographer has placed her strategically leaning into the foreground of the picture plane, emphasizing her power and authority. Her forward-leaning pose is the opposite of her style of photography, which is she's more interested in capturing the gritty kind of in-the-moment images that we'll hopefully get to really soon. Now here's the thing. Over the decades of her career, Nan Goldin has celebrated honesty in her photography, and there are multiple reasons for that. Whether it was losing her beloved older sister, Barbara passed away at age 18 when Nan was 11, whether it was running away from home and living in foster homes at 14, whether it was living with drag queens as an older teen, and she thought the drag queens were so beautiful she wanted to put them on the cover of Vogue, or I did, you know how you go down these little rabbit holes. I Googled Vogue and the drag queens, and there's still no drag queens that have ever been on they photographed RuPaul, but now I can see. Anyway, or whether the agony of losing many of her closest friends in the 1980s to AIDS, and many of her friends were photographers and artists, and she has this powerful portfolio of photos of people near death, and also she shot them during the time that they suffered from AIDS, which reminded us, of course, of the cruelty of American politicians and others who mocked those who were different. Or when she was severely beaten by a jealous boyfriend to the point of almost being blinded. And I actually tried to get that slide for you today, but her studio would not allow it. So Goldin has experienced horrendous physical and emotional pain throughout her life, but she has emerged resilient, strong, and celebrated. However, it was her withdrawal from Oxycontin that she describes, quote, as the darkest time of my life, end quote. And that's saying a lot, considering that, you know, she ran from home as a teen, and then the rest of her life is really quite unusual. I want to share with you, and I have it on your table. I want to share with you I call it a manifesto, And if you want to, I'm not going to read it all, but I wanted to share this because she published this manifesto after she became clean from Oxycontin. She went into a hospital and spent about 2.5 months getting clean. And so these are in her own words, published in a very prominent art periodical. And so here it goes. I survived the opioid crisis. I narrowly escaped. I went from the darkness and ran full speed into the world. I was isolated, but I realized I was not alone. When I got out of treatment, I became absorbed in reports of addicts dropping dead from my drug, Oxycontin. Then I'm skipping down to my relationship to Oxycontin began several years ago in Berlin. That's where she has a second home. It was originally prescribed for surgery. Though I took it as directed, I got addicted overnight. It was the cleanest drug, and this was not the first time she was addicted to a drug either. It was the cleanest drug I'd ever met. In the beginning, 40 milligrams was too strong, but as my habit grew, there was never enough. This is just what should shock you all. She says, I went from 3 pills a day as prescribed to 18. 3 to 18. I got a private endowment and spent it all. Like all opiate addicts, my crippling fear of withdrawal was my guiding force. Counting and recounting, crushing and snorting was my full-time job. I ended up snorting fentanyl when she couldn't get any more oxy. She ended up snorting fentanyl, and I overdosed. Whew. So I have to get back to my notes here. So the next 3 slides that I'm going to share include the images that were published alongside her manifesto in Art Forum in late 2017. The first, this first one is self-portrait, first time on Oxy in Berlin. So I just wanted to point out here that in addition to honesty, there's a real fierceness to Goldin's work, as evidenced by the photo that she shared with Art Forum, documenting her very first time on Oxycontin. How prescient was she to photo herself at this particular moment? How would she ever have known what her addiction would have led to? In many interviews, she says this, quote, photography saved my life, end quote, which is no exaggeration. And the next slide here is Dope on My Rug in New York, 2016. So what's going on here? You know, we're in her private New York apartment where it looks like a purse or a tote bag has just erupted. And we're privy to her own personal pharmacy, basically, here, whose contents include heroin. Don't ask me to point out which is which. I have no idea. Heroin, Oxycontin, Adderall, cigarettes, sleep mask, cell phone, camera, and Tums. Apparently anyone on Oxycontin needs Tums. Why does this even matter? Well, even in her addicted state, she lets us into her world where her focus is on the detritus of the day. We're looking at hard substances, some of them illegal substances, which really contrast with the kind of soft quality of the rug. This is an intimate world, seemingly quite chaotic and messy. Like many other of her images, it's not neat, it's not cheerful, that's an understatement, and it's not it's not pleasing to the eye. Instead, it is disturbing, it is painful. It's painful for us to look at, but this is the world of someone suffering from an addiction, yet it is her reality, and what a reality it is. She's essentially drawn back the curtain so we can see inside this drama. Now, these two, the photos, the 2 photos that are kind of merged there on the, I thought I put 3 together, which I didn't. Okay, these are an Oxy script, and Stacey earlier pointed out there were 200 Oxys.
If you look, there's the quantity for the pills in this bottle, 200 pills.
Well, she says she got them from FedEx, and she got them from other drug dealers and so forth. So she did, and then she ran out of money. So that's how she stopped with that. But one is called OxyScript, the one on the left, and then the one on the right is Crushing Oxy on My Bed. To be clear, we have a super successful artist who was given Oxycontin in Berlin in 2014, who became immediately addicted and almost died after losing her ability to procure more. She turned to heroin after that, which when mixed with fentanyl almost killed her and caused her to have an overdose. After reading Patrick Radden Keefe's A New Yorker article, she determined that she needed to step up and take a leadership position in holding the Sackler family responsible. Okay, so and after 2 months, 2 months after the pain. Oh boy. 2 months after her article in Art Forum was published, she founded the acronym PAIN, which stands for Prescription Addiction Intervention Now. And so that's what you're looking at here. You are looking at a group in her home getting together that used the tactics that were inspired by the 1980s AIDS protest group ACT UP, when people were advocating for better health care and better treatment for those who were suffering from AIDS. And for Goldin, the 1980s were really tragic times. So because she left her biological family, and when she went into the foster system and lived with drag queens, and then went to New York and lived, at the time when 42nd Street, she worked on 42nd Street, and she had no money, and her people who kind of lived on the edge of society became like her family to her. But back to Pain. Pain's initial aims were twofold. One was to convince museums to stop accepting financial donations from the Sacklers, and think about that. That's a pretty bold goal. And then the second was to have the Sackler name stripped from museum buildings or galleries. So you're looking at a photo of the Pain group meeting at her home, in her living room. Each one had a direct connection with addiction, whether it was the loss of a loved one or whether it was themselves suffering. And you can see it runs the gamut of people. There were young people, old people, former users, parents of people suffering, artists, friends. And she was determined to use her social and her reputational capital to reach these goals. And you can see here, this is the mantle in her living room, and it's just so incredibly moving, and just it speaks to her as an artist and as a human being, because it tells many stories about her, including the powerful black and white photograph of one of her closest friends, the multi-talented artist and AIDS activist David Ivanorovich, who was in his 30s when he passed away of AIDS. And so the photograph is very important to her. And then there are bottles of Oxy in that bell container, that bell jar on the left. A sculpture by one of the very first trans friends of hers named Greer Langton, someone who she's also very close with. And then in the center is what is called the Golden Lion Award, because as you'll find out, she started off herself filming the Pain group's experience. And so she wanted to have a record of it. And eventually a very famous filmmaker entered her orbit, and they produced a documentary called All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, which premiered in Venice, and it won the first prize, which was the Golden Lion Award. But we'll get to that soon. Okay. Now, beginning with what Pain called die-ins, like DIE-ins, or rallies in museums and galleries endowed by Sacklers involving blood-soaked money, fake money, or piles of fake prescriptions or phony pill bottles, Goldin and key stakeholders began fighting the Sacklers for some semblance of accountability, end quote, for their greed, their arrogance, their denials, and their hubris. Now, how did Goldin's unusual museum strategy work? How did she get such wealthy, trustee-driven museums to shed their offers of much vaunted financial assistance and their named Sackler galleries? Well, first, she targeted them and other cultural institutions, such as the ones you see on the screen. And her leadership and Payne's actions were responsible for bringing awareness that Sackler philanthropic monies were dirty, that they were blood monies. There needed to be a big-time moral reckoning. There needed to be a big-time moral reckoning.
And if I can just interject, the Sacklers were nouveau riche on the scene, right? So no one knew where they got their money. All of a sudden, they're donating galleries and museums and spaces.
All of these museums are
right.
impacted.
But people are like, who are these people? How'd they get their money? But they were so, they had put so much space.
Secretive.
Think about. Go ahead, Jody.
Do we have a time frame of what we're talking about right now?
This was so yes, when she published her manifesto, that was 2017. So this is 2 months after she started Payne, and then they strategized. So 2017, 2018, and I'll show you a couple more. But think about that for a moment. Museums of the prominence and cultural snobbery of the ones we're looking at are not the easiest group to influence, nor do they ever move with alacrity. Museums with their history and their dominance and their wealthy patrons who use their resources and power to advance their social standing, just like what the Sacklers were doing. Here they are, and then here comes this feisty female artist marching in to their galleries with an army of supporters, often unannounced, screaming, "Sacklers lie, you die," and other epithets, throwing fake pill bottles and into fountains or pools. It was choreographed for maximum effect, maximum impact. Who do you think the museum sided with? Now, tangential to this, according to a 2021 New York Times interview with writer Robin Pogrebin, conducted with a woman, Rebecca Beaulieu, about the state of museums and where their donations come from. So interesting. Beaulieu said, quote, that we are seeing museums transition, and this was in 2018, we are seeing museums transition from gatekeepers of the elite to arbiters of social change. And there is an increasing expectation that museums are institutions held in the public trust and therefore not accountable to therefore are accountable to the general public. Now, there's no data to connect Goldin's leadership and advocacy to this transitional shift in the philosophy, but since I used to be a betting woman, I used to bet with my dad, but I don't bet anymore because he's not here, but I consider myself a betting woman. I would venture that Goldin had a major impact on that shift and the move toward more culpability. Pogrebin went on to report that as a result of Payne, some, and now mostly all, the museums have refused the Sacklers' money. The first one was the National Portrait Gallery in London, and they were waiting for about over $1 million donation, financial donation to their operating budget. But at the same time, they were planning a large Nan Goldin retrospective. So guess who won that battle? So refusal of funding was the first major plank in the Payne strategy to be accomplished. Taking down the names off the walls proved to be more challenging, but it was eventually accomplished. Now, let's see, where am I? Okay. The Sackler family had been major supporters, mostly Arthur Sackler, major supporters of the Met for over 50 years, and they had endowed nine galleries. We're looking at the entrance to the jewel in their crown, the Temple of Dender. How many people have been to the Temple of Dender? I would imagine many people have. That sacred Egyptian space, one of the most popular stops at the Met. A very grand space indeed, befitting its first iteration as an Egyptian temple built of sandstone right on the Nile. You can't get more romantic than that. And especially, it was built right after Mark Antony and Cleopatra were defeated by Caesar Augustus. 31 BC. I love it. I just love it. So when Egypt built the Aswan Dam in the 1960s, engineers knew that this temple would be submerged forever if it wasn't moved. So the temple and its huge pylon or gate was composed of over 661 blocks of heavy sandstone. And it was a gift of Egypt to our country. And President Lyndon Johnson at the time determined that it should go to the Met. So in his seminal New Yorker article on the Sacklers, Patrick Radden Keefe reported that Arthur Sackler, and by the way, he had an unrequited relationship with the Met because Arthur Sackler wanted desperately to be a trustee of the Met, but he never was invited. But he did manage one thing that Stacey did not. She talked about collecting. He had a ginormous Asian art collection, a lot of Japanese and Chinese art, lots of jades and bronzes. And he talked his way into letting the Met, or asking the Met, to store 2,000 of his works at no cost.
For free. With the promise.
Right, with the promise that they would be gifted. And that's just unheard of. You never ask a museum to store your own personal art, okay? And certainly we'll get to what happened to his Asian art in a minute, but Arthur was the one who negotiated the $3.5 million deal to endow the space where the Temple of Dender was located. Are you ready? $3.5 million over 20 years. 20 years. And on top of that, a big tax deduction. So it seems as the smooth-talking Arthur could manipulate the Met only up to a point, but when the most suave, the most multilingual director, Philippe de Montebello, became director in the late 70s, he didn't put up with Arthur Sackler at all, or his demands. And that's when Arthur Sackler decided to take his bronzes and jades to Washington, to the Smithsonian. And that's why there was a Sackler gallery on the mall. Let's see what we're going to do. And this photo shows the dedication of the Temple of Dender in the late 70s, and then the next one is going to show you Arthur and some of his prized possessions, and there's the Sackler Gallery.
By the way, it's very hard to find any images of Arthur online. It's been scrubbed. So this one pops up like 90% of the time. It's so hard. They've done such a good job of getting rid of any trace of him. It's creepy.
And then I really wanted to show you how just... Just an example of their largesse. When Mortimer Sackler turned 70, he had a grand birthday party at the Temple of Dender, and he had a birthday cake in the shape of a Egyptian sarcophagus with his face on it. But we just couldn't. We were not that clever. Okay, so it was in 2018 that Goldin began her anti-Sackler crusade, turning the Temple of Dender into a scene of what we would call today as performance art. According to Manola Dargis of the New York Times, it was, quote, a clash that pitted the artist against members of a family that is both extraordinarily wealthy and a great philanthropic dynasty. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. And it also pitted Goldin, and this is really what the point I wanted to bring to your attention, it pitted Goldin against the art establishment that helped make her an international star, end quote. In other words, she had a great deal to lose by leading these die-ins, and she had a lot at stake in going in these confrontations. But this is really so fun to talk about. The whole scene was a complete unscripted drama, from unsuspecting tourists, little kids, to uncertain security guards. They had no idea what to do because there were like 100 people coming in throwing pill. Well, you can see all the pill bottles in the reflecting pool. shouting chants of temple of money, temple of greed, Sacklers lie, thousands die, tossing pill bottles that have the label Oxycontin prescribed to you by the Sackler family, major donors of the Met, into this pool, the pool anyway. And then there were people who were collapsing on the ground, including Nan Goldin. She goes prostrate everywhere. Well, I'll show you one at the Louvre in a minute. And so Patrick Radden Keefe described the Met die-in as the temple battlefield, and there's really a powerful picture, a scene of this rather, in All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, which I wanted to show you, but better angels came to my rescue, because it's All the Beauty and the Bloodshed is definitely worth your time. It's a little over 2 hours, and it's on Amazon Prime if you're so motivated. But by 2021, the Met eventually removed the Sackler name from 7 out of the 9 spaces, including the Temple of Dender, so it's no longer called a Sackler gallery. And this is a huge break from traditional museum operation, that they had to chip it off, literally chip it off. And this opened the floodgates for other cultural institutions, such as the Guggenheim, which you see here. And about a year after the Met die-in, Payne staged another major happening at the Guggenheim. And you just have to know Frank Lloyd Wright is probably just smiling from heaven, or wherever he is, I don't know. And this is another site of Sackler donations. And so what distinguishes the space, though, is its distinctive shape, right, like a spiral, and the flow. And Payne advocates use the shape to its max, throwing fake prescriptions off the edges of the circular stairway, falling like snow, pelting the rotunda filled with prostrate protesters, covering each balcony with vibrant red banners and bold messages. And then here's Nan lying on her back, right here, right in the middle. You can't miss her curly red hair. Yeah. And after the Guggenheim, there was no stopping Payne, who went on to punish other museums, such as the Louvre in Paris. And here's Nan Goldin putting her body on the line for her beliefs. She's really extraordinary. And according to Art News, after accomplishing their initial museum-driven goals, Payne shifted its advocacy to seeking better addiction treatment and harm reduction efforts through prevention centers, which is an ongoing project. And Goldin has had the last word, saying, quote, "In the end, we've succeeded in pushing many museums to cut ties with them. Sacklers have been pushed off boards and shamed in public." That's very important. The whole idea of prominence is so important to them. And remember Isaac Sackler's quote that Stacey gave us a little while ago, that the most important thing is your name. Well, Nan Goldin says, we've changed the public meaning of their name from philanthropists to opioid profiteers. So while she was leading her die-ins, Goldin made sure she was documenting them because she intended to make a film, as I said. Enter Laura Poitras, who Laura Poitras may be familiar to you if you like to watch documentaries. She's made one on Julian Assange and one on Edward Snowden. And she read about Nan, and she glided into Nan's orbit, taking over the project, which is probably, seeing as she's a professional filmmaker. So these are 2 posters from the documentary, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. And then here's Nan and Laura Poitras at the Academy Awards. That's the year that Navalny won the Best Documentary, so too bad, because there's a whole, Terry Gross interviewed Nan for over an hour, and it's very interesting. And one of the last questions she asked her was, "What are you going to wear to the Oscars?" And she was excited to talk about it. She's pretty serious and pretty straightforward and pretty pretty direct. Let's put it that way. So we're almost finished, folks. Thank you for your patience. So how did Nan Goldin, the artist, become the heroic Nan Goldin of today? I've alluded to the fact that her life hasn't always been easy. In all the beauty and the bloodshed, Goldin opened up to Poitras, revealing things that she'd never told anyone before, particularly details about her early life and about her big sister, Barbara, and how Barbara's life and death, and how the series of events, that just kind of was like dominoes. Once she lost her big sister, she could not abide living in the home with her parents, and I'll give you a few insights in a minute about that. And so the majority of the following quotes that I'm going to share with you, I'm just not going to say quote unquote. I'm just going to say, if you watch the movie, they were all from the they all were from the movie, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. And she spends a lot of time on these early years talking about growing up in a claustrophobic suburban DC home with parents who were emotionally unavailable, distant, and unloving. Her mother said repeatedly, "Don't let the neighbors know what's going on here." And doesn't that really make you wonder? Okay, because there was so much screaming coming from the house, when in fact the neighbors knew everything. That's what Nan Goldin says. Her neighbors knew everything. According to Nan Goldin, when her beloved older sister Barbara, who was 7 years older, was a year old, quote, "Mother demanded that she speak in complete sentences, so she stopped talking for a year and a half," end quote. The fact was that Barbara was like a mother to Nan, which was surprising as she had not been mothered herself. Barbara confided everything in Nan as they aged, and especially and importantly that she was made to fear her sexuality. But Goldin surmises what Barbara needed was just to be held. Can we even imagine? When Barbara didn't conform to her conservative parents' demands, she was sent to multiple mental institutions and was labeled mentally ill. Ironically, she was treated with Valium. I mean, it's just, thank you, Arthur Sackler. Right. This and many other factors led her to taking her life at age 18 by lying down on railroad tracks. Yeah. When police came to let her parents know, her father wailed, but her mother said, quote, "Tell the children it was an accident," end quote. And Nan says, quote, "We were adolescents, that's all. No one loved us unconditionally or helped us make sense of all the confusion," end quote. As a result of losing her big sister at such an impressionable age, Goldin determined, and this explains her photography, she determined to dedicate herself to unmasking secrets, bringing truth to light, reality as it is. So the next couple of slides, this is Nan and her sister. And then the next few slides are examples of her acclaimed work, and it in no way even begins to touch her biggest project, which was 700. It was a slideshow because she couldn't afford the film at the time, and she changed the slides. She would show them in New York in the 70s and 80s, and she set them to music. But that's Nan right here in Boston, where she eventually went to get an MFA. I'm sorry, not an MFA, an art degree at the College of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Okay, so Nan Goldin lived a hard life, but she didn't have to become the David to produce Goliath. Possessing this rebellious spirit, she's demonstrated bravery beyond normal, putting herself in situations as uncomfortable as being followed by goons that were hired by Purdue. When they found out she was making a film, they followed her. And then, of course, they took out ads. Purdue took out ads in the New York Times about her. And then on one other occasion, Nan went to a screening of one of the Sackler family grandchildren who were doing a documentary film, and they called her out from the stage, and security was sent to escort her from the hall.
One of Arthur's daughters. I think her name is Elizabeth.
No. It was not. It was the granddaughter. It was Raymond. Oh. I mean, it was Mortimer's granddaughter.
Okay.
It was Madeline Sackler.
Okay.
Ooh, we have two Madelines in the room today. Nothing like this family at all. The complete polar opposite. This is an artist who recently achieved a status that many would give up their firstborn for. She was invited to join the Gagosian Gallery, some would argue the most commercially successful art gallery in the United States and around the world, another indicator of her art world standing and status. Personifying longevity, dedication to her cause, and the antithesis of greed, Nan Goldin stands in stark contrast to a family whose greedy secrets have polluted a generation, along with being responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands. How they look at themselves in the mirror, we'll never know. But Nan Goldin's efforts have endowed her as a superhero. Thank you. Now, here are just, wait, there's one more. I just have one more. She shows a lot of, intimate, very intimate images. So please join us a month from today when we will be talking about lust. Not greed. We're done with greed.
Thank you very much.